Today we're going to talk a little bit about promises and covenants. Now we've all made a few promises and we've heard a few promises. How about when your child promises that he'll get his homework done if you just let him go play today? Or maybe it's the covenants that you gave in marriage, that one that said, I will love you until death do us part, only somehow that marriage gets broken. Promises and covenants by man are so easily broken. But today we're going to talk about someone who has never broken his promises before. In 1960, Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner did a famous comedy skit with a 2,000-year-old man. This man knew a lot about life because he'd been around a long time. Today, we're going to talk to someone who's been around just a little bit longer. I'd like to introduce you to the 6,000-year-old man. Good morning. Now, we were just talking about the 2,000-year-old man. Do you know him?
Who, that young whippersnapper? Yeah, I've known him since he was knee-high to a locust. I never knew his name. We always just called him Junior.
Well, he seemed to know a lot about Bible times.
Well, he was around during Jesus' day, but he only knows part of the story. God was busy showing his love for mankind long before that. It all started when God created a 24-hour period of alternating light and darkness on earth. Then he said, "Phew, I'm tired. Let's call it a day." Well, to make a long story short, God finished creation, then he made a special place for his children to live. This garden is where the golden thread of God's covenant love began. Oh, it was a beautiful place, a real paradise. They called it Rancho Palos Verdes.
Now, wait a minute. We live in Rancho Palos Verdes. Didn't he call it the Garden of Eden?
Oh, well, okay. I guess I could be wrong about that.
Can you tell me anything about the first human beings?
Oh, Adam and Eve? Yeah, fine-looking couple. They were really in love. It was as if they were made for each other. I remember Eve had a good sense of humor. She was always ribbing Adam. She'd say, "What's that lump in your throat, Adam? Did you get an apple stuck in there?" Anyway, God really loved Adam and Eve. He gave them everything they needed, including every kind of fruit tree you can imagine. There were oranges and mangoes and bananas. He even gave them apples. They had Apple iPads and Apple Watches and Apple...
Wait a minute. I think those were invented a lot later, weren't they?
Oh, yeah? Oh, well, I guess I could be wrong about that. Anyway, there was only one tree they were not supposed to eat from, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I brought along a picture for you.
So Adam and Eve stayed away from that tree?
No, out of all the fruit they could have had, those naughty kids decided to eat the one that was forbidden.
So what did God do about that?
Well, Adam and Eve realized they had messed up big time, so they tried to hide. I'm sure God wanted to tan their hide. Instead, he gave them new clothes made out of hide. God loved them so much, he sacrificed an innocent animal's life for their sake, thereby continuing the golden thread of his love.
Well, what happened next?
Well, because of their disobedience, Adam and Eve had to leave the garden. You might say Eve ate them out of house and home. And we've all been suffering the consequences ever since.
Well, that's quite a story. Now let me see if I can sum it all up in a single sentence. Our first parents were created in a state of innocency, but by their disobedience, they lost their purity and happiness, and as a consequence of their fall, all men have become sinners, totally depraved, and as such are justly exposed to the wrath of God. Does that sound right?
Hey, that's pretty good. Kind of rings a bell, though. I might have heard that somewhere before.
Okay, so what's the first thing Adam and Eve did after leaving the garden?
Well, they went out and raised a little Cain, if you know what I mean. Then they decided he needed a little brother. Adam says, "I'm ready." And Eve said, "I'm willing." And next thing you know, boom, there's Abel. Well, after the boys grew up, they each decided to present an offering to God. God accepted Abel's offering, but not Cain's.
Well, why did God reject Cain's offering?
Well, I think Cain couldn't please God with his offering because he just wasn't able. But I could be wrong about that. Anyway, Cain was really angry and jealous of his brother, So he slew him. That's a really old King James word. Do you know what that means, young lady?
I'm pretty sure I do. I think it means he killed him.
Yeah, it's really sad. Adam and Eve lost 2 sons that day since Abel was dead, and God sent Cain into permanent timeout as a punishment for his evil deed. But God continued weaving his golden thread of love through history, and Adam and Eve begot another son to take their place. Then they begot another, and another, and another. They were begetting and begotten left and right like a bunch of rabbits. Pretty soon, there were people all over the place.
So is that how the whole world got populated?
Well, not exactly. At first, all those people remembered how much God loved them. Before long, though, they started to forget, and pretty soon it seemed like the whole world had turned away from God's love. God was ready to press the Alt-Control-Delete and just wash the earth clean with a huge flood and start over. But he wanted his covenant promises to continue unbroken. So he chose to save the only remaining righteous man and his family.
Just one man? What was this man's name? Was it Enoch?
No,
Methuselah?
no,
Lamelech?
no,
Oh, Noah!
yeah, that's it.
Okay.
How did you know? So anyway, God saved them along with all the animals of his creation and everyone else drowned in the flood. When the flood was over, God put a big symbol in the sky as a reminder of his love.
You mean the rainbow?
No, I think it was a big heart-shaped cloud, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a rainbow.
Well, I guess that would make more sense, since you can never find the end of a rainbow, just like you can never find the end of God's love.
So what happened next?
Well, after Noah and his family came out of the ark, they built an altar and thanked God for his promise, the promise of his never-ending love, and he promised to love God forever in return. So God blessed Noah's family with many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren.
Okay, I think we've got the idea.
Well, eventually, people once again began to forget about God and started getting big-headed. In their pride, they decided to build a huge tower to reach into heaven. So they formed a bricklayer union and got to work. Every day when it was time to start their shift, they would blow a trump. That's why they called it Trump Tower.
Wait a minute. I'm pretty sure Trump Tower was built in the 20th century, and it was named after Donald Trump.
Really? The Donald?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, okay. I guess I could be wrong about that. But I do know that they were building the tower because of their pride.
And when did this happen?
Oh, it was in the summer.
How do you know it was summer?
Oh, everybody knows pride comes before the fall. Anyway, God was not very happy about their arrogance. Back then, they all spoke the same language, so God decided to confuse them by making them all speak different languages.
Really? What languages did they speak?
Well, not sure. It all sounded like a bunch of babble to me. I think I heard Arabic, Egyptian, Latin, and Pig Latin. Not sure, though. They were all Greek to me.
And what happened next then?
Well, since they couldn't understand each other anymore, they all went their separate ways and soon forgot about God again. But God still loved his children, so he decided to make his covenant clear to them through one particular man.
I remember hearing about that. That was the story of Abraham, right?
Yep.
Did you know him?
Who, Abe? Oh, yeah. He was a tall, skinny guy. Wore a big stovepipe hat, and he put his face on a penny.
I think you're getting mistaken. I think that's a different Abe. I think we're talking about Abraham from the land of Ur.
Oh, yeah. There were pirates there, you know.
Pirates?
Yeah, it was the land of Ur.
I thought pirates said arg.
Oh, not these pirates. They spoke with a Jewish accent. Ur. Anyway, God told Abraham, get up and go. I'll tell you where later. Kind of like this commissioning thing you got coming up here in a little bit.
So God made a covenant with Abraham.
Yep. God promised that he would continue the golden thread through Abraham and his descendants forever. And old Abe trusted God, so he got up and left with his father, his brother, and his nephew Lot. Later on, Lot moved to Sodom, but the city eventually became a very low-rent district. So God did some major remodeling, and He kicked it all off with a giant fireworks show. But God warned Lot and his wife first so they could get out of town. Did I mention Lot's wife? Yeah, she was the salt of the earth.
So what happened to Abraham?
Well, he started producing all those descendants God had promised him. There was Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and a bunch of others I can't remember right now. Eventually, they became slaves to the gypsies.
Do you mean the Egyptians?
Oh, whatever. They ended up having to make blocks for the Pharaoh.
Wait, don't you mean bricks?
Whatever. Then Pharaoh finally let them go after God gave them all pimples.
Wait, don't you mean boils?
Whatever. They left and went across the Red Sea by using the overpass.
Wait, don't you mean pass over?
Young lady, are you telling this story or am I?
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. Well, their GPS was broken, so they had to wander around in the desert for a while. But they finally got to the Promised Land.
Why did they call it the Promised Land?
Because there were lots of Starbucks there. I think the favorite drink was the milk and honey frappuccino. But I could be wrong about that. Anyway, the golden thread of God's covenant continued to weave its way through the Israelites' history. First, God gave them judges. I remember one of them named Gideon used to go around all the time putting Bibles in all the hotel rooms. And then God gave them a series of kings.
You mean like King David and King Solomon?
Yeah, I remember little David. Annoying little kid. He always carried a slingshot around with him and was constantly talking in poems. And Solomon, well, he was a real wise guy. God also gave the Israelites a bunch of prophets. Now, I know that the Salvation Army is a non-profit organization, but back then there were lots of prophets. There was Elijah and Elisha and Hosea and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Jonah. Jonah, now there was one fishy character. But through it all, God continued to keep His promises and to love His children. And He continued to forgive them, and He continued to call them back to Him.
Is that when Jesus came onto the scene?
Yep. After 400 more years of preparing people's hearts, when the time was just right for the ultimate display of His love, God stepped into human history in the form of a little baby, born in a humble stable.
Were you there that night? What was it like?
Oh, it was beautiful. There were more stars out that night than at the Academy Awards. The stable was really crowded, though. In addition to all those animals, there were a bunch of shepherds and 3 guys that came in on the Orient Express. They did bring some nice gifts, though. There was some gold stock for the family's portfolio, and some guy named Frank brought some incense for the aromatherapy diffuser, and another guy brought some kind of fancy lotion.
Myrrh?
No, I don't know what his name was, but Myrrh came later to the stable.
Well, it sounds like it was quite a night. Thank you for sharing that incredible story with our audience.
Oh, wait, there's more. It's true, Jesus stepped into human history to live among us, to preach and to teach and to heal, and to show us the Father's love. But He came for more than just that. He came as a sacrifice to atone for our sins.
You're talking about the crucifixion, right? I always thought that was just a story about how cruel and heartless and violent men can be.
No, it's much more than that. It's part of the golden thread of God's covenant, showing us just how deep the Father's love for us is.
Deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. Great the pain of searing loss, Father
those are really good words. His wounds have paid my ransom. I have to write those down and remember those things. That's a very moving conclusion for this story.
Wait, the story didn't end there. It's true, Jesus gave his life for our sin, but he didn't stay dead. He conquered death and rose from the grave.
Really?
Trust me, I was there, remember? That was the greatest day in history.
Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. When Jesus won. When Jesus won. When my Jesus won. When Jesus won. When Jesus won. He washed my sins away. I'm talking about a happy day, y'all.
Wow, that really sounds like the greatest day in history.
Yep,
Well, was that the beginning of the Christian church then?
yep,
And the church has grown and thrived ever since, right?
nope.
No.
Oh, it started out fine, except for the Christians occasionally being tortured or burned to death or eaten by lions. But after a few hundred years, they went through some dark times that seemed to last for ages. So they called it the Dark Ages. During that time, some people went into seclusion in monasteries. God used these people to preserve and protect the golden thread from getting lost in the darkness.
Those were called monks, right?
Right. I especially remember three of them, Alvin, Theodore, and Simon.
I think you're confusing those with chipmunks.
No, I think Chip lived in a different monastery, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, what happened after the Dark Ages?
Well, a few hundred more years passed, and the church still wasn't doing so well, but God still loved his children and his church, so he brought about a time of reformation and revival.
And how do you do that?
Well, he sent a whole series of Billies to revitalize the church. There was Billy Booth. You've heard of him, right?
Of course I have.
Yeah, then there was Billy Sunday, and of course, Billy Graham. And don't forget about Billy Gates.
Wait. How did Billy Gates have to do with the church?
He installed windows in all the churches, the stained glass windows.
No, Bill Gates sold a program called Windows. I don't think that's right.
Oh, well, okay, I guess I could be wrong about that.
Do you know we have our very own famous Billy right here at the college?
Really?
Yes, it's Major Billy Francis. He's the smartest, funniest, most popular officer here on campus. But I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your 6,000 years of experience with us. In spite of all the ups and downs in the church and the number of times people have turned away from God, it sounds like the golden thread of God's covenant love has remained constant throughout history.
Yep, and the story's not over yet. When Jesus returns, we will see him in all his glory. I've seen a lot in my long lifetime, but I cannot imagine how beautiful that sight will be. His covenant love for us is too marvelous for words and too wonderful for comprehension. And even if I live for another 6,000 years, I will never be able to fathom the depth of that love.
Oh, well, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I had a lot of fun putting it together for you. The important thing, though, is not that we laughed and had a good time, but that we understand the true meaning of what God's love is. I want to leave you today with a scripture and treat this as our benediction today. It's found in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. I pray that Christ will live in your hearts by faith, and that your life will be strong in love and be built on love. And I pray that you and all God's holy people will have the power to understand the greatness of Christ's love, how wide and how long and how high and how deep that love is. Christ's love is greater than anyone can ever know, but I pray that you will be able to know that love. Then you can be filled with the fullness of God. Amen.